Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's program, Environmental Considerations in M&A Transactions. My name is Greg Bishop, and I'm a partner in the corporate section of Williams Mullen, and I'm joined by my colleague, Jesse King. Jesse is a partner in our Environmental and Natural Resources. Today's program, we're going to cover what to do and look for during the due diligence phase, why it's important to quantify any environmental impact related to assets and past practices, and the how is how to manage these risks associated with the issues in the context of your M&A transactions. Okay, just a few housekeeping items. At any point during the presentation, you may submit a question by using the Q&A button at the top of your screen or top or bottom of your screen. We'll turn on the questions at the end of the presentation. We'll turn to the questions. If you're having any audio or technical problems, please use that same Q&A button and our helpful marketing folks will work to get those resolved. And finally, no need to write anything down. We're going to make all the slide deck available to you, and you'll receive a copy later today as in an email. And if we don't get to any of your questions, we'll address those to you when you by email as well if we run out of time. Today's presentation is about 15 minutes long, so we'll be going quickly. To start it off, I want to say, I do M&A all day, every day. That's my practice, and we use various experts within the firm for specific sections and deals. And I'm thrilled to have Jesse King with me today. Jesse is such a good environmental lawyer, but even more is Jesse's practicality when dealing with transactions. So I think that's going to be particularly important for us to think about in the context of today's conversation. So I want to start it off with a question for Jesse, and that's, what is the standard environmental due diligence in mergers and acquisitions transactions involving real estate?
Thanks, Greg. Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you. Just as some background, when we are looking at a transaction, I get involved somewhere when the deal is starting, the due diligence is starting to get going, and the documents are being put into whatever the file site is. And at that time, I'll get a call from Greg or Larry Parker or anyone within our firm saying there's some environmental issues I'm seeing in the Dropbox, and we're going to need someone to go over them. There's some real property that's part of the assets, and we need someone to give us just sort of the overview of is there going to be an issue here. So my job, I see my job as taking all those documents together, looking at them, and determining, first of all, are there any large issues that the client needs to be made aware of? What are the risks involved on the environmental side? And to do that, we look at the due diligence documents I have up on the slide is a phase 1, a phase 2, if there is one, which is testing. And compliance evaluations are sometimes done of past practices. So, sometimes all you have is a phase 1, and or you're in the process of getting a phase 1, which is, I think most of the people on this call know what that is, but that's basically a study of any real property involved in this acquisition that may have a threat of a release of a hazardous substance. So your consultant's going to figure out if there's a threat of a release of a hazardous substance or an actual release of a hazardous substance at your property. And why is that important to you all? Well, if you're buying a business, you want to know if there's any risks associated with those assets. So you want to know if your real property may have had a release, any property you're going to be acquiring, or you may want to know, is this business that I'm going to be acquiring, are they in compliance with their permits, or am I going to walk into a problem where EPA or the state agency is going to be coming after us with huge penalties or cleanup fees? So that's what I do is I tell you, hey, the phase one looks good. I do that for banks. Sometimes a bank, we have clients that are banks may say, I need you to look at this and tell me what's going on. Is this a risk to my client or customer? So I'm looking at all the phase one information. I may recommend that you get a phase two, which is actually the actual testing of the soil or the water or the vapors to make sure that we sort of quantify what are the issues at this property. Greg, what you brought up earlier is true. Sometimes I like to know what is our client's tolerance for risk. Sometimes it's huge. Sometimes we have clients that say, we're going to buy this no matter what. So yeah, we need to know what they are and we need to know what the potential costs could be to deal with those, but we're going to buy it. So let's figure it out quickly. Let's get an expert involved that can tell us what the cost might be to clean this up, and then let's figure out how we're going to deal with that.
Hey, Jesse, let me interrupt for a second. Do you, let me flip for, you mentioned if we're a buyer, how they assess the risk. Let's say you're a seller and you've owned the company for many years and you're obviously going to be comfortable with the risk because you've run the business, nothing's come up. And now all of a sudden a phase two comes, they may be familiar with the phase one, but maybe a phase two reveals some risk that a buyer who isn't as familiar with the business indicates a lot of resistance. And then the seller, our client, let's say in this particular example, they're frustrated because the buyer should just, for lack of a better term, get over it. This isn't going to turn into anything. How do you help a client assess that risk?
Yeah, a lot of times, and this does happen, we've had clients with this. I always say, let's try and quantify the risk ourselves before we get too deep into the transaction. So we're ready for the questions that we anticipate are going to come back and we have a good answer for them. In some deals, you do have buyers that simply are not risk tolerant. And one of the ways we deal with that is through the reps and warranties. We will make sure that we are not repping and warranting anything outside of what we're comfortable repping and warranting. If we need to carve out a piece of property, we've done that, where we've decided, hey, we'll hold the property, the seller will hold the property, and you can lease it from us when you buy the business. That's been an answer to a lot of our clients. Insurance can be an answer. Or, if you need to, you put money in an escrow to cover post-closing costs related to that. So there's lots of different ways to address it. But sometimes I've gotten on the phone with an attorney at Troutman Sanders or Hunton and Williams who says, my buyer's not going to buy, we are freaking out, this is a problem, and just have to get them to quantify what they, explain exactly what their fears are, and so that we can address them. A lot of times it's really just a back and forth, and everyone realizes that they're going to buy this. So if they need to do more testing and figure it out, then they need to do that. One thing I did put on my slides is that you have to be careful with testing if you're a seller, because a lot of states have reporting requirements. So if the deal falls through and a potential buyer has tested your groundwater and reported that to the state, you're going to be the one to have to deal with that issue after the fact. So you just want to make sure that everybody's aware of those risks going forward.
Let's move on to another question, just given the amount of time we have. Okay, another thing I definitely wanted us to get to was, in my world of M&A, why is it important to quantify environmental issues during the due diligence period? The quantification question in particular.
Yeah, and that's something we just sort of touched on, but some of the risks you're going to have contamination risks, and CERCLA, or the Superfund law, says that if you own the property during the release or after the release, you're going to be liable for those. If you're an operator during the release, you're going to be responsible. In an M&A, if you're buying everything and you are going to be standing in the shoes of the company you're buying, you're going to be on the hook for those, for cleaning up if that becomes an issue. You're also going to be on the hook for non-compliance. As I said, you may want to do an audit to see what their compliance is. You may want someone to say, hey, they're not storing their hazardous waste properly. No one's said that they're in violation, but we see that they're in violation of their hazardous waste storage. So let's get them to clean it up and fix it before we take control of the company. And then of course there's risk to employees that you want to know. Are there vapors inside the building, or asbestos or lead, where we're going to be, there could be a threat of liability for those issues. And then you want to say, okay, like I said before, how am I going to manage those risks? I want to buy this company, or I want to sell this company. How can we get past this? And as I said, there's things within the document, the sale document, the transaction agreement, that we can try and balance by repping and warranting the issues, having a strong indemnification if you're the buyer provision, and limiting it if you're the seller, to make sure that you're not going to be dinged all the time for issues moving forward, carving out if you need to, escrow agreements, environmental agreements. The other thing is, to manage the risk, you're going to want to know, is there anything that we need to disclose to the state regulators? Have we been in violation for years, and we need, the company we're buying has been in violation, and if they get caught, it's going to be a very large fine. If that's the case, you can make, both on the federal level and in every state, there's an audit protection, a privilege to your audits, where you can do a self-audit and you can self-disclose violations and avoid penalties. But there are very specific procedures to do that. And so that's another way to manage your risk, is to say, let's audit it and let's disclose it and let's fix it. And that way we can quantify what those risks are and avoid any penalties, but just deal with getting things up to speed once we close.
Well, Jesse, one thing I've noticed when I've worked with you is that we've run into this. I think that there's an initial wash over a client or the other side of a transaction, that there's almost an element of strict liability in connection with environmental risk, that sometimes people that just, for lack of a better term, freak people out. What you've put up around managing the risk and quantifying the risk, I found it very helpful, that how you have early on in the transaction, you kind of let people know this is going to be an area that's going to be really, that could be contentious, but it's more about education and figuring what different buckets we can put these risks in to make it kind of all work out. That's the way that's a real benefit that I've seen in a environmental lawyer who isn't as myopic about the particular risk and what the problems are that could derail a transaction. But okay, these problems are here whether you sell to my client or you sell to the next client, someone else's client. So let's try to figure it out and get a solution. Well, I tell you, this is, when we set up this presentation, we want to do it fast. We want to do it in 15 minutes so everybody can get a flavor of this. But as we were told to be the case, the 15 minutes has gone by immediately. Let me just assure you, we've had some questions in the chat box. We're going to get back to you on those questions via email. And I also want to remind everyone that we're going to send out the slide deck for the slides we didn't get to, so you can see them. And please email Jesse or me, anything. We love these dialogues. We love the opportunity to do it. So thanks everybody for joining us. Please reach out to us. And again, thank you so much for being part of our series and checking in. Jesse, thank you.
Thank you.